приехал сюда, первый же день такой.
When I came here, the very first day, that was like, wow! Can you imagine? Here it is, climbing into the mountains, looking down. The ocean, the amphitheater, Funchal, the sea. For me, what I am, that was like a bomb. For the first 9 months, I was like a monkey here. I was in a car, driving by Portugal, France, in the mountains. All the time I was turning from window to window. Like everything I ever wanted, all I wanted in my life, it just came true.
Как будто вот раз и вылилось.
First of all, let me tell you the Portuguese point of view. Every Portuguese has a relative in his family who left Portugal and lives somewhere. This is why our attitude to foreigners is very tolerant. We had a huge inflow of immigrants in the late 90s, right from former USSR. Sometimes it was something like 2 or 3% of the population. People who couldn't speak, couldn't talk to doctor, they couldn't get money in the bank or sign the contract. And as a rule, we are very tolerant to things like this. It doesn't bother us. We used to be immigrants ourselves, and me too. So the country of Portugal may be not the richest, but tolerant. Art Center Caravel, the Embassy of Portugal in Ukraine, and the Embassy of Ukraine in Portugal present. We are going to tell you some stories about the people who moved from Ukraine to Portugal. People with different prosperity, different social status, different cultural background. They have chosen the island of Madeira, which is popular in the world as a wine producer and touristic mecca. And for our heroes, it has become home and a new motherland. Why Portugal? Maybe because of similarities between two cultures, or a close relationship starting since 90s, when millions of workers found there the salvation from poverty. Maybe because of the isolation of the island. Each one had his own reasons, but thanks to each one of them, in Portugal and in Madeira, people compose the portrait of modern Ukrainians. Two cultures, Ukraine, Portugal.
Португальці ставляться до українців дуже добре, тому що українська громада, яка займає третє місце по своїй чисельності.
The Portuguese get on well with the Ukrainians because the Ukrainian community, which is already the third largest in Portugal after Brazilian and Cabo Verde, Ukrainian community is very positive. And this was mentioned by the head of the country, for example, by the president of Portugal. And the Ukrainian president was glad and proud to hear that. And also the Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa, also mentioned the diligence of Ukrainians who is working for the goodness and prosperity of Portugal.
Працелюбність українців, які дуже багато зробили для того, щоб підвищити добробут Португалії.
Eu diria que há uma ligação à terra que existe aqui.
I would say that there is some connection with the motherland, which can be seen both in Ukraine and in Portugal. This is why two nations get well with each other. The evidence of it is that easygoing adaptation, while the first immigrants were coming to Portugal. Their assimilation was easy because of that huge cultural similarities. Of course, there are some differences coming from that old-school education, which has its lacks and benefits. The benefit is that Ukrainian discipline, and the lack is that Ukrainians are just a little bit warlike.
Muito baseada no antigo sistema.
It all has started in 19th century. During the last quarter of the century, there were some special agents who were traveling across Ukraine and searching for the potential immigrant workers for USA, Canada, Latin America and for Europe. That was the very first stage of Ukrainian immigration. The agent was paid from $2 to $5 per each Ukrainian family. And this is the first Ukrainian official immigrant, Andriy Goncharov, the monk from Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, moved to USA in 1865. The second stage occurred between two world wars. This time, the Ukrainians themselves were leaving the country, looking for salvation in Europe from the poor Soviet standards of life. The third stage was political. Ukrainians fled from the Stalin repressions. They moved to USA, Canada, or to England and France. But the most wide-scale stage happened in late 90s. The millions of Ukrainians moved abroad searching for jobs and prosperity. And in Portugal, there was one of the biggest Ukrainian diasporas. Nowadays, second after Brazilian. Thousands of Ukrainians in that period stayed in Madeira, along with Russians, Belarusians, and other refugees from post-Soviet poverty. Madeira, the Ukrainian island.
Essa integração já está, ou seja,
The integration is already here. The Ukrainian community in Portugal is very important. And even more, part of Ukrainians who live in Portugal, they are already the citizens of Portugal, the most part. And even those who is following their national traditions are not going to leave Portugal. It's hard to imagine that any one of them may return to Ukraine, except that for pension. We had the immigration peak for Ukrainians in 90s. Then more than 200,000 people came here. Of course, some of them came home later, but most part stayed in Portugal.
no pico da imigração ucraniana tivemos mais de 200.000.
Ну, если вы немножко пройдете про нашу историю, понимаете, что...
If you turn attention to our history, then you will see that we had numerous guests even from Russia, and many of them were artists. Sometimes they came here for rest, sometimes for cure, especially in the 19th century, but those were high society people. For example, Churchill. This is one of our resources, which I believe in. Madeira inspires. Madeira has so much nature, which many countries doesn't have. The water, the forests, the nature itself. Otherwise, if the person would like to come here, nowadays you may easily travel across the world, see various places, but we still hope that some people come here, feel themselves comfortable, and live here on a beautiful island.
Природы много таких людей не могут.
Як я приїхала, для них
I often tell them stories about Ukraine, give them listen to my grandfather's works, for example, liturgy, and it happened so that my students, they got interested and excited. Then I proposed them Kvitoslava Tsisik. They loved it and even wrote it down in Ukrainian. So I have created so-called Ukrainian club at home, Ukrainian art club. I often have guests from Portugal, Italy or Spain. We have various nationalities here in Madeira, and children and adults, they get more knowledge about Ukrainian culture and ask me to tell more and to show more. Music, ornament, books, everything.
просять показати книжки.
The years are passing by, and now it's time for the Ukrainians in Portugal to touch the culture they still keep in their hearts, and for the Portuguese to know more about the world around and about the people who live in their country. Art Center Caravel, the Embassy of Portugal in Ukraine, and the Embassy of Ukraine in Portugal present the project Petrokivka, the Heart of Ukraine. 2 weeks in Madeira and 2 days in Lisbon. The visitors will not just see the legendary Petrokivka painting, but also they will become themselves the part of the art. We are going to show about 60 masterpieces in Portugal. There will be paintings, different works on canvas and paper. Also, we'll bring a variety of wooden works decorated by Petrokivka painting and covered with varnish. Such style is called under-polish painting. In Portugal, we will display works of 2 artists, Halyna Nazarenko and Natalia Stetsenko, both of them born in Petrokivka village in eastern Ukraine. Halyna Nazarenko has traveled all around the world with the exhibitions, probably more than any other artist who presents the beauty of Petrokivka painting. We are going to show that Ukraine has such a wonderful kind of decorative art. Natalia, like Halyna, is one of 5 best Petrokivka painters in the world. Petrokivka painting is the ancient Ukrainian folk art. We say that this is the soul of Ukraine. Why? To my mind, because of its bright, vivid colors. There are no sorrowful motifs in this art. It amuses your soul.
Побачити петриківського розпису негативно, якусь сумному.
Nowadays, officially, Madeira became a home for 500 Ukrainians. Most of them are musicians, painters, art patrons, people who left behind the vanity of big world to find oneself or just to do what they like.
Само ощущение острова тут интересно, потому что как бы...
I have lived all my life on the continent, so the feeling of living on the island is something special for me. The ocean is all around. Here I have more amazing opportunities. Ukraine is an industrial country, and I was always involved in these technological processes. I met different kinds of installations, then I worked in cinema. Here everything goes another way. It gives me another vision and new possibilities.
Тут чувствуешь себя на острове. Вот, что дает тоже другой взгляд и другие возможности.
So, what is so special in this isolated island at the Atlantic Ocean? What Ukrainians can find here and cannot find in essence of Dnieper, spaceless Carpathians or Odessa views? Why did they leave big cities to get to the island, which is just 60 kilometers long? Does it have another climate or environment?
Секрет острова
The secret of this island in its natural relief, I think. But first time when I stepped on this island, I was very sad. I was missing my home. I thought I don't need it, never need it. Everything seemed drab to me. And really, winter, spring, summer or autumn are similar here. But then, after a while, you start to see new colors. You see all this spectrum. Even if I visit the same favorite place for 20 years, it can be a forest or mountain peak. Every time there is something new. That's why I think that Madeira attracts with its boundlessness. Immensity of nature, of beauty, it really exists. And the ocean. Ocean talks to you like it's alive. It's really alive.
який дуже живий.
Ukrainians on Madeira are now a friendly society. They celebrate holidays or visit activities organized by local associations. One of such institutes is the Art Center Caravel, which was founded in 2015. Besides the international exhibitions and expositions, it became a meeting place for Ukrainian artists. So they create not only paintings or songs, but also their own perfect motherland. Madeira for me now is an opportunity to get more involved into art, to work as an artist, because in Ukraine I was churched mostly in cinema, special effects and so on. I didn't have much time to make some free art. So a long time ago we bought a house here, came here on vacation every year. But the situation in Ukraine has changed. Our life also changed. Some opportunities were taken away, but nevertheless, some new possibilities appeared. One of them is opportunity to live at Madeira and work as a painter. Last year, as far as I remember, the Ukrainian Association set up a cultural week or something like that. There was Ukrainian cuisine, we danced a lot, we were invited, I even made part of dancing program. People played musical instruments because there's a lot of our people who plays in classical or other types of orchestras. I never thought that I can compose music. Lately, I compose more and more, but the way my brother, big brother, also well-known musician, violin player and composer, he graduated as a composer at Lviv Conservatory after graduating traineeship in Moscow. He composed music and how composes. I thought it's a fair succeeded from his grandfather, but I never tried to do it myself. So here I made some arrangement and then small compositions.
Mas enfim, sei que existem alguns
I knew some intellectuals who moved to Portugal, and so simple assimilation has happened. We got used to assimilate and to adopt everything. And this is not just the feature of our nation, but we did it through centuries. We have a beautiful country, good for living, with mild climate. And talking about intellectual arena, Portugal claims to be the avant-garde of cultural scene. Maybe that's the key, but I must admit that I know a lot of youngsters in Ukraine who strive to move the culture forward, especially artistic. Youth is very addicted to the culture. From what I can see, for example, in Kyiv, young people are fascinated by street art. Ukraine and Portugal have been building diplomatic relationship since 1992. But the cultural background is much more reliable than time or events which took place in both countries. Each one of us or our activity is the cultural background. Doesn't matter where you live or create, in Kyiv or Madeira. Paintings, songs, folk art. This is the way to make the world better, isn't it?